You walk into the supermarket and something tightens almost immediately. Not dramatically, not in a way that would be visible to anyone else, but real. A kind of internal bracing that happens in the first few seconds. The fluorescent lights overhead are not just bright, they feel like they are actively pressing on you. The white walls, the reflective floor, the particular quality of artificial light that leaves no shadow anywhere, that erases every soft edge. All of it arrives at once. And all of it demands something from you that you haven't quite agreed to give. You've noticed it in other bright places too. The open terrace of a restaurant at noon, the sunlit waiting room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The plaza downtown where everything is white stone and maximum sun and there is nowhere to stand that isn't fully exposed to the overhead light and the open sky. In those places, other people seem to simply exist. They eat, they talk, they squint mildly and continue. You look at them sometimes with a genuine, low-level bewilderment. How are they not bothered? How does all of this not feel like too much? You have your preferred geography, the corner table, the seat facing away from the window, the walk that stays in the shade, the bar where the lighting is amber and low, the office with the blinds angled just enough to soften the afternoon. You are not trying to be difficult. You are not being dramatic. You simply function better in a certain quality of light, and you have slowly, pragmatically organized your physical world around that fact. But you've also noticed that your preferred geography is getting smaller. At some point, the avoidance graduated from a preference to a pattern. You declined the outdoor lunch because you knew you'd spend the whole hour uncomfortable. You chose the indoor table when everyone else wanted the terrace. You left the shopping mall earlier than you needed to because the fluorescent environment was wearing you down in a way you couldn't easily explain to the people you were with. And each time, the decision made sense in the moment. But the accumulation of those decisions has a shape that looks increasingly like a life organized around avoiding things that other people navigate without thinking. What makes this hard to talk about is that it doesn't have an obvious name in everyday conversation. Bright lights are not supposed to be a problem. Sunshine is supposed to be good for you. Everyone says so. To say that large, brightly lit spaces make you anxious or exhausted sounds like an excuse or like sensitivity for its own sake. But there is a real, researched neurological explanation for why some people respond to high stimulation environments the way you do. And it is not a character flaw. It is a feature of how your nervous system processes the world. If you've ever felt genuinely uncomfortable, drained, or anxious in very bright, high-stimulus environments, this video is for you. We're going to explore what psychology and neuroscience say about sensory overstimulation, why some nervous systems are built differently, what it costs those people socially and emotionally, and how to build a life that works with that reality rather than against it. Comment below. Does bright artificial light make you uncomfortable or anxious? I want to know how many people have a nervous system that prefers shade. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind behaviors that almost no one understands, subscribe to the channel. The concept that most directly names this experience is sensory processing sensitivity, a trait formally identified and studied by psychologist Elaine Aron beginning in the 1990s. Aron's research established that approximately 15 to 20% of the human population, and a similar percentage across many animal species, possess nervous systems that process sensory and emotional information with significantly greater depth and subtlety than the majority. This is not a disorder. It is a trait, like left-handedness or a particular musical aptitude. It involves more thorough processing of stimuli, greater responsiveness to nuance, and, critically, a lower threshold for overstimulation. For people with high sensory processing sensitivity, which Aron termed the highly sensitive person or HSP trait, environments with high sensory load, bright lights, loud sounds, strong smells, many simultaneous visual inputs, are not merely unpleasant. They are genuinely depleting. The nervous system is doing significantly more work per unit of time in those environments than in a quiet, dimly lit room. It is processing more, filtering more, evaluating more. And like any system running at high capacity, it eventually needs to reduce the input load, or it begins to malfunction in the form of irritability, difficulty, concentrating, anxiety, headaches, or the general feeling of being unable to function that people sometimes describe as sensory burnout. The neurological mechanism involved here is worth understanding precisely. The human brain has a system called the reticular activating system, or RAS, which is responsible for regulating the level of cortical arousal, essentially how activated and alert the brain is at any given moment. Bright light, particularly artificial blue spectrum light like fluorescent lighting, directly stimulates the reticular activating system and elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, while suppressing melatonin production. For most people, this effect is mild and manageable. For people with sensitive nervous systems, the cortisol response is more pronounced, and the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, may activate in response to light intensity that other people's nervous systems simply absorb without alarm. This is not psychosomatic. The discomfort is not generated by thought. It is generated by a physiological process that varies meaningfully from one nervous system to another. Research in sensory neuroscience has identified individual differences in the density of photoreceptors in the retina, in the sensitivity of the trigeminal nerve to light-induced activation, and in the reactivity of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the cortisol regulation system, that together produce a wide range of individual responses to identical light environments. Some people's nervous systems find fluorescent supermarkets neutral. Some find them exhausting. Both responses are physiologically real. Now, psychology adds another layer to the neurological story. Because while sensory sensitivity is partly a matter of innate nervous system architecture, the emotional relationship with overstimulating environments is often shaped by experience, specifically by the experiences of childhood. Many people who are highly sensitive grew up in environments that were chronically overstimulating. Households with high conflict, high noise, unpredictable emotional intensity, or chronic stress. In those environments, the already sensitive nervous system never had adequate opportunity to regulate and recover. It learned to be constantly vigilant, constantly at a low-level activation, because in that household, the environment was genuinely unpredictable and demanded constant readiness. For this nervous system, high-stimulus environments in adulthood are not just sensory events. They are emotional ones. They carry the physiological signature of the home environment that was never safe enough to fully relax in. The fluorescent supermarket, the sun-drenched plaza, the conference room with white walls and overhead spotlights. These environments activate not just the sensory pathways, but the alarm pathways, because at a deep neurological level, they feel like the high-stimulation environments where something uncomfortable was always about to happen. This is a form of physiological conditioning that operates below conscious thought. You don't consciously think, "This bright room reminds me of the chaotic kitchen from my childhood." The association is not narrative. It is somatic. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, in the way the heartbeat quickens and the shoulders rise and the mind begins to scan for threats when the light gets too bright and the environment gets too loud. The child who learned to brace in overstimulating conditions becomes the adult who braces in them still. The social cost of this is real and worth taking seriously. When your nervous system has difficulty with bright, open, high-stimulation environments, a significant portion of contemporary social and professional life becomes challenging. Modern offices are designed for maximum light and openness. Floor-to-ceiling windows, open-plan layouts, white surfaces that maximize natural light. Shopping centers, events, social gatherings, restaurants with bright terrace seating. The places where ordinary socializing happens are disproportionately the places that are hardest for highly sensitive people to inhabit. Over time, the pattern of avoidance that develops around these environments can quietly limit the social life. Events declined, invitations politely avoided, the slow retreat toward only the environments that can be tolerated comfortably. The world doesn't shrink dramatically. It shrinks in increments, one declined invitation at a time. There is also a secondary social cost. the difficulty of explaining this to others. It is easy to explain a peanut allergy. It is harder to explain that large, brightly lit shopping malls exhaust you in a way that interferes with your enjoyment and functioning. People may understand intellectually, but still feel confused or faintly dismissive. This can produce a kind of social isolation that is not just about the avoidance of bright places, but about the experience of having a nervous system that the world around you doesn't quite account for. The loneliness of being the person who needs the corner table, again, while everyone else sits happily in the sun. Step 1. Name and legitimize the experience. This is the foundational step, the one that makes the rest possible. Stop treating your sensitivity to bright environments as a weakness, a quirk, or something to push through and apologize for. It is a neurological reality. Labeling it accurately, I have high sensory processing sensitivity. My nervous system processes stimulation more intensely than average, removes it from the category of personal failure and places it in the category of self-knowledge. Research consistently shows that having an accurate, non-shaming framework for understanding one's own functioning improves the capacity to manage it. You cannot manage something you are still trying to deny or minimize. Step 2. Build sensory recovery into your day deliberately. The highly sensitive nervous system needs adequate recovery time after periods of high stimulation in order to function well. This is not a preference. It is a biological requirement like sleep. If you spend 3 hours in a bright, overstimulating environment, your nervous system needs time and space afterward to return to baseline. Low light, low noise, low social demand, physical stillness. When this recovery time is planned and protected rather than obtained through avoidance, meaning you go to the bright place and then deliberately recover afterward, it becomes possible to function in a wider range of environments without the same level of depletion. The difference between management and avoidance is whether the recovery is built into the plan. Step 3. Expand tolerance gradually through controlled exposure. Avoiding all bright, overstimulating environments permanently is not a solution. It is a strategy that works in the short term and narrows your world in the long term. The evidence-based approach, drawn from exposure therapy and sensory integration work, is graduated exposure. Intentional, time-limited encounters with the overstimulating environment. In conditions where you have resources available, sunglasses, a planned exit, a recovery period immediately afterward, the company of someone who understands. Over multiple repetitions, the nervous system's alarm response to the environment gradually habituates. You are not changing your nervous system's fundamental sensitivity. That is permanent. You are changing the alarm level, the level of threat the environment represents. What was once overwhelming becomes merely effortful. What was effortful becomes manageable. There is something worth acknowledging about the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from inhabiting a world that was not built for your nervous system. Most of the physical environments you navigate every day, offices, shops, transport hubs, social venues, were designed with the median nervous system in mind. They were not designed with the knowledge that 20% of the population would find those environments significantly more demanding than the other 80%. You have been adapting every day to environments that require extra work from you simply to occupy them. And you have probably been doing it without the language to explain it, without the social permission to acknowledge it, and sometimes without even fully understanding why you feel depleted after experiences that others walked out of fresh. That work is real. The accommodation you make every day for a world that doesn't fully account for your nervous system is a labor that no one sees and most people don't count. The highly sensitive person who manages 3 hours in a bright, noisy environment and comes home needing quiet and dim light isn't weak. They ran their nervous system at a higher output for those 3 hours, and the recovery is proportional to the expenditure. Your preference for shade, for corner tables, for dimly lit spaces and quieter environments is not a personality eccentricity. It is the nervous system doing what nervous systems do, organizing the environment to support its own optimal function. The wisdom to know when you've had enough, to choose the environments where you function best, to protect the conditions under which you feel most yourself. That is not avoidance. That is self-knowledge. The goal is not a life lived entirely in the shaded corners. The goal is a life in which you understand your own nervous system well enough to take it into the full range of human experience, sometimes bright, sometimes demanding, sometimes louder than ideal, and bring it back to quiet when it needs quiet, and know the difference between a necessary limit and an unnecessary one. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who always gravitates toward the quieter, dimmer side of any room. And if you want to keep understanding the psychology behind attitudes that almost no one explains, subscribe to the channel. Because having a sensitive nervous system isn't a flaw in the design. It's one of the oldest, most attentive ways of being human that has ever existed.